Organisational Hierarchy, OCR National Level 2 in Business, Assessment Objective 3. In this assessment objective, you need to firstly be able to describe the current hierarchy of PGL using appropriate terminology. You need to be able to discuss two options for how the organisation of staff in PGL could be changed. You need to analyse the implications of these changes on managers, workers and customers, and finally you need to evaluate whether PGL should make changes to their organisational hierarchy. A hierarchy shows how workers are organised within a business. Another word for a hierarchy is an organisation chart. Generally speaking, the person at the top of the hierarchy has the most responsibility and authority. And as you move down the levels within the hierarchy, the workers in those levels have less responsibility and less authority. PGL Liddington is one branch of PGL, and there are several throughout the UK and Europe. So PGL are organised based on area and function. So this is the PGL Liddington hierarchy. You can see the general manager is at the top, then the operations manager, then we have a third layer of management with human resources, guest care, chief instructor, kitchen and housekeeping. The guest care manager manages 3 group leaders who then manage the groupies, and the chief instructor manages 3 assistant chief instructors who also manage the instructors. So this is the PGL hierarchy just for Liddington, so this is one area of their business. And you can see the workers are organised on function. So the guest care manager looks after the group leaders, looks after the groupies. Those workers look after customers, so students and staff, when they're not actually doing the activities. So during break times and during the evening, the groupies would organise activities like discos and football matches. The chief instructor manages the 3 assistant chief instructors who then in turn manage the instructors. The instructors are people who run the activities in PGL, so the abseiling, the giant swing, Jacob's ladder, the canoeing, all those things are run by instructors. So the instructors look after students and staff when they're actually doing the activities. So firstly, we need to be able to describe the hierarchy for PGL Liddington. There are 4 key terms that you need to describe. The first one is layers. Layers are levels of management within the hierarchy. So in PGL, there are 5 layers. The general manager is the first, the operations manager is the second, the line beginning HR is the third, the line beginning group leader 1 is the fourth, and the groupies make the bottom layer the 5th. Authority and responsibility. The higher up in the organisation chart, the more organisation and responsibility an employee would have. Chain of command. This shows the route of formal communication up and down the hierarchy. So, if the general manager wanted to pass an instruction to the instructors, he would tell the operations manager. The operations manager would tell the chief instructor would tell the assistant chief instructors, and they in turn would tell the instructors. If the groupies had an issue that they needed to raise, they would tell their group leader, who would tell the guest care manager would tell the operations manager would tell the general manager. So they're the formal channels of communication. It doesn't mean that these people can't talk at other times, it just means that this is the main formal way of communicating up and down the hierarchy. The last term is span of control, and that is the number of people a manager has direct responsibility for. It's the number of people directly below a manager in the hierarchy, and it is expressed as a number. So the general manager's span of control is 1, the operations manager. The operations manager's span of control is 5. The guest care manager's span of control is 3. So it's the number of people a manager has direct responsibility for. You need to discuss how PGL could change their hierarchy. The first option would be to make the hierarchy flatter, have less layers in the hierarchy. This would involve delayering or removing a layer of management. If you remove a layer of management, you make the people within that layer redundant. That's not the same as being sacked. If you're sacked, it's something you personally have done. If you've been made redundant, it's because your job no longer exists. Another option would be for PGL to demote the people that were in that layer. So, for example, the assistant chief instructors could just become instructors. So instead of losing their job, they could take a job lower down in the hierarchy. If you get rid of a layer of management, you make the hierarchy flatter. That means the chain of command would be shorter. So when you were passing instructions, instead of passing instructions through 5 layers of management, you would be passing instructions through 4 layers of management. It would also have an impact on the span of control. So for example, if you decided to delayer and remove the operations manager, the general manager would then have a span of control of 5. He would have to manage all the people that were previously managed by the operations manager. So, if you delayer, what impact does that have on managers? Well, first of all, whenever you start making people redundant, it makes the people who are left feel worried about their job security. So that might give them additional stress. Managers who are left will also have more work to do. If you take managers away, the work still has to be done. So the existing managers would be more stressed. But it might be an opportunity for them to take on new challenges. The impact on workers might seem more difficult to understand. But actually, if your manager is more stressed, they're more likely to snap at you, they're more likely to be rushed and have less time for you, so that does have an impact on the workers. Also, if their manager has more work to do, the workers are likely to be less closely supervised. That might be good for some of them because they can work under their own initiative, but if they've got a problem, it would take longer for the manager to resolve that problem, and new workers would find it difficult to get help. The impact on the customers, where it would be if there were less managers, it would take longer to get problems sorted out or answers to questions. So, for example, if you wanted to change the common room that you've been allocated as a group, you would need a manager to agree to that. But if it took a long time to actually find a manager, it would take a longer time for you to be able to move your common room. The second option is more complex. The second option for changing PGL's hierarchy is to have a matrix structure. Matrix structure involves people working in teams. So you can see on the screen in front of you that there is a production director, marketing, finance, human resources, people who manage the people, and a research and development director. Usually people would work in functions, so the production director would just manage people who were to do with production. In a matrix structure, people are pulled out of their functional areas and work together in teams. So, it's thought to encourage creativity, so people are working with people out of different departments. Individual workers might have a greater understanding of the challenges faced by different departments. There might be more opportunity for responsibilities for individual workers because in their team they could be the only people with their skills, and it increases flexibility in the business because workers get used to working in different teams. But it can make individuals feel insecure and isolated, and a lot of times people don't like change in the first place. So how could this matrix or team structure be applied to PGL? Well, instead of having groupies working together and managing customers when they weren't doing their activities, and instructors just looking after the activities, we could actually group workers together in terms of teams, and we could have teams specialising in different age groups of customers. So, for example, we could have a team looking at Key Stage 1 and 2 customers, so kids who are sort of 4 to 10 years old. We would have in that team instructors, groupies, housekeeping and catering staff, and all of that team would just deal with younger students. Key Stage 3, we'd have the same. Key Stage 4, we'd have the same. So workers would just get used to dealing with one age group of customers. So, for example, the foods that Key Stage 4 kids like to eat might be different, so the catering staff might need to think about the options in terms of what they cook. in terms of the activities that the instructors can run. Key Stage 4 kids, who are 14, 15, 16, will be easily able to cope with activities like Jacob's Ladder, canoeing, whereas the younger children might not be able to access those activities. So, what would the impact be of this on workers? Well, as a worker, you would get used to dealing with the age group of your customers. So you would be able to approach children on their level. So if you're used to dealing with 5-year-olds and then suddenly you're dealing with a group of 15-year-olds, your approach, your language, your attitude, what you expect from those kids is going to be totally different. Whereas if you know and are used to working with older children, you'll be able to get involved in the banter, and it should make it a more pleasant working environment for you and for the students. It might be that you're the only person with certain responsibilities or skills in your team. So if you're the only person in the Key Stage 4 team who is a lifeguard, you might be the only person who can supervise the canoeing. So this might give you more responsibility, might make you feel more of a leader in that activity. So it could be quite motivational, but it also could be quite isolating if people in your team don't understand your job. The impact on managers could be that if staff like working with one particular age group, they might be more motivated. So they might be less likely to call in sick, less likely to complain, less likely to look for another job. Also, their teams will become experts in the needs of their key stages. So, for example, on an evening, children want something to do. What 5-year-olds want to do and what 15-year-olds want to do is going to be quite different. We had a disco on one of the evenings. It didn't really work very well and the kids weren't up for it because there was no other kids from other schools, so it wasn't very much about sort of standing around and chatting. And also it was a massive room and the kids felt really self-conscious when they were dancing, so they didn't really like the disco, and in the end we ended up with most people outside playing football. If our groupies had anticipated that, they could have set up the football team tournament from the start and perhaps organised some sport things for the girls as well. So if your teams, if your teams are then experts in your needs, that's good for managers because it makes it easier for them to manage their teams. It also makes it more likely that customers will go back because they'll have a better experience, so their business will make more profit, and that will reflect well on the managers. However, managers might have to manage people who do different jobs from themselves. So someone who was an assistant chief instructor might have to manage somebody who works in housekeeping, changing the beds. They might not understand the challenges of that role, so it might be difficult for them to manage that person. Impact on customers. Well, as we've already said, if your groupies know how to deal with your key stage, you're likely to have a better experience. It will be more smoothly planned, the activities will better suit the age group of your students, and you'll have a better experience, so you're more likely to go back. But if you're always dealing with the same group of PGL staff, if you don't like one of them or don't get on with one of them, they're likely to be with you for much more of the time. So those kind of personality clashes might have a much bigger impact on the customer experience. So, your job now is you have to explain how the PGL hierarchy currently works, and you have to explain and recommend 2 changes. So you need to be able to discuss the impact on workers, managers and customers of the changes that you suggest, and then evaluate whether PGL should make those changes. You can use the notes that you've done already, you can use this screencast, you can use textbooks, you can look at the PGL website. You've got plenty of sources of information. Try and explain everything in as much detail as you can with as many examples as you can think of, so you can get the highest level possible. Off you go then.